Welcome back again to Penny Olive, Free Motion Quilting Educator. I wanted to go back again today and look at some of the combining embroidery with free motion quilting. I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago to our local quilt guild, Cheyenne Heritage Quilters, on this subject and also included several tips for them. And the woman who was doing their newsletter put those tips in there, and I really didn't mean to share them that way, but it was great. I went through and pulled some of those tips out and also wanted to go over those real quick because I'm not sure I covered it in that way when we did some before I had taken my break. So let's just look at a little bit of the fun that at least I had. I love sharing. And you can tell that I was a little bit surprised, but a lot of, you'll see these today, but some fun little quilts that I made with the embroidery and using one of my favorite tools, the line tamer. And I'll also go over this new, this rollerball pen and some things that are great about it and how to get rid of the marks. So first of all, let's look at one of the quilts that I've actually given away. So I won't be able to show that live, and I'm going to show that from my iPad as well. Once I go through a couple of preliminary things, I'll show you the very simple ways you can quilt these little small quilts that are super for gifts and such. And here is an example of just straight lined beadboard on diagonals. A sweet little embroidery design, very simple, and then the border, and then the diagonal line. So I wanted to show you that before we started. A couple of these little wall hangings I've already put up on my wall in my quilting studio to fill up a little bit of that one wall. But I do want to show you something that I did for that guild so you could tell. When we do something small like this, it's very tempting to not secure the batting with spray based or pins because they are pretty small. But what I want you to see right here is what can happen, because if that batting is not secure, if the quilt is not secure, you can skew your whole little quilt and it can be cockeyed portions of it. So that is a little skewed on the borders, and that's because it wasn't secured beforehand. It still turned out okay and it's doable, but that's just a caution to make sure you secure your quilt before you start. Okay, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to shoot at the long arm the whole time. I would rather turn this around and look at one of my quilts, but I have a lot of glare in this room from the little spotlights. So this is one of the best places right now, but I'm going to work on that. Since I've moved it around, it's a little bit difficult. So free motion quilting combined with embroidery designs. I'm going to recap some of the things that we have gone through in some of the other quilts that I've shown you. So I take a simple embroidery from Embroidery Designs. Most of the time you can take it from any place. I try to stick with more simple designs, but I also wanted to show that you could get a little fancier. I'll take the design and I'll usually use a larger quilt. I like larger designs. And then I'll cut it out proportionately with fabric. So I use extra fabric so I can make it a little bit bigger. Once I do that, then I will cut out my border, and I usually will use 2-inch strips for my border. Those will finish at 1.5, and they're large enough but not too large to where I really do not have to quilt those, so I don't. And the whole purpose of these is they're great wall hangings and they're great for gifts, great for Christmas gifts. And I did a whole set of these for a conference that I attended as giveaways, and they were very quick and I gave all of those away, so I had to make a whole new set when I spoke for the guild, and it didn't take long at all. The longest part is just getting them all stitched out. But then you can work on the borders and such while you're waiting for them to stitch out. So we'll start, you just saw the one that said believe on there, and then this one says grace. And so the first thing I wanted to show is that you do not have to know how to do free motion quilting well in order to do this. You can use straight lines. And with these, I just added in a little, what I call grass, put a piece of grass in there. And when I got to this grace area that was in the middle of some of those, I just skipped it. I didn't worry about getting it where it was harder to do and I was backtracking over things. I didn't worry about that. I just got outside of this area. So to do that, one of my tips, and most of you know this, is the line tamer ruler. And it comes in two sizes. It comes in the longer one, and this is the shorter one. I think it's 6 or 8 inches. And they are fabulous. And I'm really coming to love them even more, starting to work with my Janome for free motion quilting all the time, when I'm not using the long arm. All of these that I'm showing you today were done on my Janome 15,000. So yes, domestic machine. So I love the line tamer. However, you need a ruler foot for that, which is available for most machines now, even with even for the 1/4 inch thickness of most of these. But you do not have to. You can mark it with a marking tool and stitch it by sight, as long as you just are able to stay steady enough. So for marking, and I'm going to intersperse these little tips here. For marking, I used to use a Marks Begone or something similar. And now I found this somewhere, I noticed it, but they have a roller ball out. This is not going to be felt, which is what most of those are. It lasts longer and it doesn't dry out. However, maybe not this one. In fact, I know I just erased something with it and it did not come back. But the Marks Begone, the bright blue one, can come back quite a bit. And some of the other off brands may come back. You can moisten them just a little bit and dab them, which is what I have historically taught. And then some of it may come back, but not a whole lot. When you do it again, then it doesn't come back. Well, I have a wonderful tip that I found online, and I believe it was at Natalia Bonner's site. I think it's called Peace in Quilts. On my bird quilt, Serenity, I found that it was a Marks Begone, and it was all coming back, and it was just awful, and I was horrified that I'd wasted all my time, and this was going to be a mess. And so I looked online for a tip for that, and it took me to her site. And so you can use anything, but I just use an extra water bottle because or spray bottle, I have several of these. 1 teaspoon of baking soda to 1 cup of water. You pour them both in. Before you do it, you shake it up real good, and then you can spray, and they do not come back at all. I did that entirely with my bird quilt. I will testify that that's correct. I can use it even after the first time if it still has more in it. I just have to shake it up quite a bit and then do it again. So another point on that. So you can do these with a ruler. Even if I use the line tamer, I use a ruler because I line up my line tamer with that ruler to make sure I get right on the marks. Another easy way to do these, and this was probably my last post that I made before I took my break, was just echoing. So on this particular one, I put in a few designs like holly leaves and such, and then I started echoing, and I pulled in those extra designs, and the echo got more involved until it engulfed the whole design. And then as I got closer to the edges, some of the designs were completed. I was only doing different parts. So it's very simple and a lot of fun, and not a lot of skill involved. If you want to add in designs, you can draw them first and then stitch them out and then do the echoing. So another option. I always love my feathers, so this was just a lovely spring quilt. And I took the tulips, added a feather circle I'm sorry, a circle. I made it into a feathered wreath. And then rather than doing small pebbles or anything, I just echoed out to the borders. That's all. This one, actually, I mistakenly forgot what I had done, and I cut the borders 2.5, so it ended up at 2 inches, but I didn't worry about quilting it. It's still fine. Then you also saw over on the corner the happy quilting with the yellow. That was above the love to quilt. And that was just done with circles, just round and round circles. A lot of fun. I took some other ones that you had seen, but then I also showed, before I do that, besides the blue, I'll use blue line marker on light colors. I will use chalk on a chalk pencil on dark colors, and this works great and usually is gone before you finish your quilt. I also wanted to show, and you might be able to see the relief better that way, I'm not sure. For these quilts, when I do them, I like to use wool. I do not wash these. If you wash them, they will alter the appearance. If you press them with an iron, you will smash down the wool and the designs, and they won't pop up as much either. So I recommend not washing and not ironing, and I will use wool. The two wools that I'll choose between are either Hobbs Tuscany or Quilter's Dream wool, and I really love Quilter's Dream wool. I don't always have the access, or if things are not that important, I may not want to spend the extra money for that. So those are the two that I choose. Also, along with the wool, options are 2 layers of cotton or cotton poly, or a layer of cotton or cotton poly with a layer of wool on top. But that's why I wanted to show this, because this is that combination, a layer of, I believe it's cotton and then a layer of wool. And when you do this, it really causes relief as you work from the center out. And sometimes you think, oh, this is not going to look right. And as you get further out, it's just all sticking up. It will. As you get to the sides or you stitch down the border, it will be fine. It's just the extra batting that causes that. So when I have students who are just starting and want to try this, I suggest just 1 layer of wool. And you still get a nice emphasis on that, but you do not have the difficulty of, someone said, I really got kind of freaked out the first time I used the double batting, because it is different. These that I have done, that I did for the Quilters Guild, all done with 1 layer of wool. I just wanted to show this. Also, when I stitch behind the embroidery like that, I like to use a finer thread. So I will use Superior Threads Bottom Line, which is a 60 weight thread, or Micro Quilter, which is a 100 weight thread. I use a 70-10, is it a 70-10? Yeah, needle. With each one of those, I probably should use a 60 with the Micro Quilter, but I can't always find that, so 70-10 works fine. What that does is it pushes down into the sandwich more, or brings it down in, and it allows a greater relief on your embroidery design. And again, I think I said this, but I do tend to use embroiderylibrary.com. But you don't have to use just what I said. When I go teaching, which I haven't been doing outside of Cheyenne much since the pandemic, but when I did and when I do, excuse me, I always look at threads. When I'm in a store that has a good variety of threads, I'll definitely look, and we'll tend to pick up some. This was in Visafil. That's 100 weight thread by Wonderful, and Wonderful has some comparable threads as well. Excuse me. So use what's in your area when you can. Patronize be patrons to your local people to keep them in business. And then I wanted also to show, finally, I'm still getting comments. What are those things that you're holding on to when you quilt? Well, these are the grippets that I started using several years back, and they are still fabulous. And when I go to these little quilts, sometimes I'll start just using my bare hands, and I'm like, oh, gee, I really should use those grippets, and I grab them out. They grip your fabric like you wouldn't believe. And they're a little bit more expensive than using gloves and such, but these will last. They're made of strong plexiglass and more like a tire rubber. And I've had them for several years. There is no wear. So they last, I can't say forever because I don't know, but a very long time. So that is all for today. Our next post will be on the whole cloth quilts that I'm working on. I'm ready to bind one, and I'm trying to finish up the other. So have a great week. I hope Friday I'll show you that, if not the first of next week. So have a super rest of the week.